last week when I was in church that as Jennifer was preaching and talking about her Sticks and Stones kind of series that she's been doing, that I was not going to be doing anything on sticks and stones. And in fact, I was like, okay, how am I going to fit a stone into, my sermon? Because I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to say. And as it turned out, when I came in today, I saw near the entrances and exits, there are little bowls with smaller stones in them. And I think you'll see today that actually there is a little bit of a fit, even though I decided to go off lectionary and talk a little about something else. So it's just funny how God works. So it is the fourth Sunday of Lent. How are we all doing? This is a time of the church year where many of us choose to give up a certain food or a drink or a bad habit. We vow to stop scrolling through our phones so much, or shopping, or gossiping. We do this to strip away the luxuries and temptations of the world and to become more like Christ. It's a penance of sorts and a reminder that there is always a niggling tickle underneath all the layers that we shroud ourselves in to get through our day-to-day lives. What is a niggling tickle, you ask? To help explain, I go back to the old fairy tale of the princess and the pea. To refresh your memory, the gist of the story goes something like this. A young woman claiming to be a princess seeks shelter in a castle one stormy night. The queen of the castle doesn't believe her to be a princess, so as a test, the queen places a pea under the young woman's 20 mattresses and down comforters. The young woman awakes the following morning saying she had a restless night with little sleep, claiming something hard kept her awake and bruised her body. The queen declares that this indeed is a princess, because only a delicate princess could be injured by a pea underneath all those mattresses and blankets. Rest assured, my message today is less about the princess and more about that pesky pea underneath all the layers. I would like to suggest that that pea is faith. Oops. Taylor warned me about that. And despite our doubts, our troubles, and sometimes even our flat-out refusal to believe in it, faith will find a way to continue to pester us or challenge us in order to be acknowledged. In our first reading today from the book of Exodus, we encounter a reluctant Moses imploring God to find someone else to lead and speak to the people because he is not an eloquent speaker. He is what he calls slow of speech and slow of tongue. God says to Moses, "Aren't I the one who gives speech to mortals? Haven't I made you the way you are? Now go, I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak." Moses replies to this directive by saying, "Oh Lord, please send someone else." How often have we said the same thing when we realize God is asking something of us that we don't feel capable of? Even though we know we are made in God's image, even when God says, "I will be with you when you do this," it's not always enough to persuade us. We move on going about our lives, but often over time, in our metaphorical comfortable bed, we still feel that pesky pea of faith making its presence known, and we must do something about it if we're going to get any rest. Spoiler alert, Moses does end up heeding God's call, and with his brother Aaron, among other things, he leads his people out of captivity. He climbs Mount Sinai, where he's given the 10 Commandments. He creates a dwelling place for a deity amid a refugee camp, and becomes a central prophet in the Hebrew Bible and in Christianity. All of this from a man who started his journey believing he was not capable, did not bear the proper gifts, and who had little faith in his abilities or God's wisdom. I'm reminded of our New Testament verse this morning from Hebrews. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Sometimes, my friend, when it comes to faith, we simply must fake it till we make it. We step out on a wing and a prayer, trusting that God will lend us his presence and his words as we need them. Speaking of wings and prayers, in 2018, I was asked by the FPC nominating committee to consider being a session member. My first thought when Karen McNeil called me was, I am not equipped for this. I'd been an official member of the church for not quite a year and had never been in church governance despite growing up in the Presbyterian church. But because we are good Presbyterians, we always make an ask like this by including, take some time, pray about it, and see if God is calling you to this. Oi. Like Moses, my initial inclination was, oh Lord, please send someone else. But I did think it over, and I did feel like I was at a pivotal point in my own faith journey. I accepted FPC's call, and in doing so, I believe I accepted God's call. 5+ years later, here I am in my second session term. Many times I have lamented, why me? And many times I have felt gutted by the work of the church. It is honestly some of the hardest emotional and human work I have ever been exposed to and been challenged to persevere through. Yet I'm 100% committed to my service, to stepping out on faith, even when I struggle myself to have faith to begin with. Maybe you can relate to this in some aspect of your own life. In January, I attended a presbytery-led training at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Upper Arlington. It was the Partners in Education training. And I found that I was in excellent FPC company when I was there. A delegation of deacons were there and leaders, and my session colleague, Keith Abernathy, was there too. One of the workshops I took was on elder training, because I know there's always more for me to learn. And having a handful of years of experience now, as well as a divinity degree, I feel like I have a new perspective on my role, and I want to be the best elder I can be in my service to the church and to God. So, of course, I took notes, because I am now trained to take notes in any type of lecture or meeting setting. And as I was listening and writing, I knew I would eventually end up writing a sermon about what I was hearing. Cathy Nice, our interim general presbyter, was leading this training, and she asked this question, which I am now posing to you. Have you grown in your faith? What is this church doing to grow your faith? Perhaps you're thinking, why is this important to ask in the context of elder training? And my response to this is, the Book of Order tasks ruling elders with being the spiritual leaders of the congregation, working to discern God's will. Along with the pastor, we are asked to guide and govern the life of the church. No easy feat. I would say here that even though our Presbyterian polity gives equal weight to both pastors and elders, it has not always felt this way or operated this way. This is why training and continued understanding of our roles is so important. I would also say here, if being in this body of Christ has not grown your faith, we are not doing our job. Full stop. As spiritual leaders elected by you, we must do better. We must do things here that allow you to wrestle, struggle, and grow in your own faith journey. Any person of faith knows that spiritual growth is not linear. It does not follow a straight line trajectory, and there are always valleys, peaks, ebbs, and flows along the way. Still, as a member or a friend of this church, it is imperative that there is the sense of a journey for you, of not staying stagnant, and in business terms, that there's some return on investment when it comes to your own ways of walking in faith. If you enter through our doors, we must make it clear that this is a safe and sacred place to take that journey, and we must live up to that. Have we always? And have you always made it a priority to nurture your own faith, challenge it, and allow it to molt, change, and bloom? In our Hebrews passage this morning, we are given examples of how various church fathers leaned into their faith to please God and to bring hope in their time. While we only tackled the first 7 verses in our reading today, the chapter goes on with many more examples of living by faith, even when events seem impossible. There's Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And then tying back to our message from Exodus this morning, Moses is listed as an example, as are Moses' people, who by faith crossed the Red Sea out of Egypt. Pesky faith. Sometimes it's all we have. Sometimes it feels like a farce. Sometimes we accept it, even cling to it. Other times we push it away as far as possible because we don't believe in it and we don't see how it's working in our lives or the world. And still, like the pea under mattresses, we cannot forget about it completely because it just keeps bugging us no matter what we do. So what do we do with this? I'm a person who appreciates a Sunday sermon that gives me something to think about for the rest of the week. I want to walk out of church with a message to take with me and maybe even a next step. This is one of the ways my faith grows, seeing how I can apply it to my life outside these walls. Does it hold up or does it fall flat? So if today in my benediction, I tell you to leave this place and take a step to grow your faith, what do I really mean? First, faith requires a belief or conviction in someone or something. So to grow our faith, we must take steps to hold and support those beliefs and convictions in a way that moves us forward and beyond our current thinking. You'll often hear that to grow one's faith, we should make it a habit to read scripture and commit to having a prayer life. Both of these are important and recommended, and they are also really hard because with both practices, there's rarely the instant gratification or transformation that our human minds seek and want. No, these practices are best sustained when they're done intentionally and over time. When these feel too cumbersome, I would invite you to simply stop, breathe, close your eyes, and say what I say, which is, God, please give me faith. I'm struggling to keep it together, and I need your holy presence. I have found that when I put this intention out into the universe, I feel better for simply asking and putting it out there. This is also the very spirit of Lent, the 40 days Jesus spent fasting, praying, and enduring temptation in the desert. I'm reminded that growing in my faith and asking God to hold me as I seek faith is one of the most Christian things that I can do. It is the essence of stripping away all the stuff and looking to a higher source for sustenance and reassurance in the face of doubt and discomfort. We cannot Amazon Prime our way out of this doubt and discomfort because it's a required step before we are given new life in the face of death, symbolized by Christ's resurrection from the dead. As Jesus bore his cross, we bear ours, and we're rewarded for our faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. As you work to grow your own faith, I ask that you allow this church to walk alongside you in your journey by taking part in our mission and outreach in the community, which is robust, by being a part of our music ministry, which is one of the best there is, by joining a study or a social group, by reading a book that's outside your comfort zone and discussing it with others, by fellowshipping inside and outside the church, and feeling welcomed and empowered to take part in the life of this place. Ask God to give you faith, but also have the wherewithal to seek faith on your own by doing things that align with Christ's teachings. We have a book for that. That honor and uplift creation, and maybe even have the courage to step out on faith by trying something you've not tried before and are not completely comfortable with. The poet and scholar Rumi has a verse that is best translated as, "What you seek is with you." If this is true, then faith is not only within our grasp, but it's our constant companion, the pea stuffed under the mattresses. Now we must simply acknowledge it and then listen for its directives in our lives. May Christ see us and hear us this day. May these words be worthy of his unconditional love, and may this church continue to be blessed and to be a blessing to others.